China has publicly snubbed the United States just days after the Trump-Xi meeting, issuing a blunt diplomatic rebuke that many interpreters say signals Beijing's displeasure with recent U.S. moves and complicates efforts to stabilize high-level ties. Xi Jinping refused President Trump's visa request, prompting a red-faced reaction in Washington that culminated in the cancellation of a planned visit and underscored how fragile personal diplomacy can be when broader strategic disagreements remain unresolved. The United States scrapped a team's trip that was linked to plans for Trump's next China visit, a decision officials say reflects both logistical fallout from Beijing's rebuff and a recalibration of outreach efforts as bilateral trust phrase. Following what critics describe as a diplomatic loss in talks with Iran, some commentators warn the U.S. now risks confronting a second symbolic defeat over Taiwan, a strategic setback that they argue could occur even before any kinetic confrontation if Washington's influence there is seen to wane. Weeks after President Trump met Xi Jinping in Beijing, fresh tensions have erupted between the two rivals, a development that analysts say exposes how quickly bilateral goodwill can fray once discrete policy disputes resurface and test the limits of high-level diplomacy. The United States asked China to waive a separate Macau visa requirement for U.S. diplomats, a procedural request Washington framed as practical and routine, but which Beijing treated as a sovereign control that it was unwilling to relax, according to reporting. After China refused the visa concession, U.S. officials announced that high-level participants would skip the Macau meeting, a decision meant to signal displeasure while avoiding a full diplomatic walkout that could have escalated the confrontation further. Macau is set to host the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Tourism Ministers meeting, a forum Washington had hoped to use for outreach and multilateral engagement before the visa wrote complicated participation plans. Interestingly, President Trump had earlier suggested he might visit China to attend APEC meetings in November, a personal diplomacy cue that now faces uncertainty as bilateral frictions over protocol and access persist. Details of the visa dispute were reported by the South China Morning Post on June 25, which outlined the timeline, the U.S. request and Beijing's response while noting the broader implications for upcoming diplomatic engagements. Because the United States has no consular post in Macau, American consular services there are handled from Hong Kong, a logistical reality that complicates travel arrangements and magnifies the practical effects of Beijing's visa requirement on U.S. personnel. China's visa rule requires U.S. diplomats to obtain a separate entry permit for Macau, a policy Beijing says is within its sovereign prerogative, but which Washington calls an unnecessary and targeted barrier to normal diplomatic activity. The U.S. described China's separate Macau visa requirement as arbitrary and targeted, framing the measure as a politically motivated obstacle rather than a neutral administrative step and signaling diplomatic displeasure. Washington says it offered a positive way forward to resolve the issue, but that China rejected the proposal, an account that highlights how limited public progress has been and how sensitive even technical diplomatic arrangements have become. The U.S. statement did not clarify whether lower-level officials will still attend the Macau meeting, leaving the final composition of the American delegation uncertain as governments weigh participation against political principles. The State Department currently maintains a Level 3, reconsider travel advisory for Macau, a caution that underscores ongoing concerns about safety, legal protections, and the unpredictable diplomatic environment affecting American travelers and officials. During President Trump's recent visit to China, she publicly warned the United States against interfering in any Taiwan conflict, remarks that set a stern bilateral tone and which continue to shape the strategic backdrop for subsequent visits she is planning, including a proposed trip to the U.S. in September and attendance at the G20 in December 2026. Just days after China criticized Japan for accelerating its militarization, reports emerged of a mysterious, partially concealed aircraft sitting on the tarmac at a Japanese airbase, feeding Beijing's narrative that something secretive and threatening is underway. On June 18, aviation watchers reported seeing an aircraft at Gifu Air Base covered in white fabric, an unusual sight that immediately raised questions about what Japan's Air Self-Defense Force was trying to hide. The sighting first went public via a Japanese Aviation Observer account on X, which shared photos and quickly drew attention from defense enthusiasts and regional security analysts. The images appeared to show a twin-tailed aircraft parked on a ramp area outside a hangar, giving just enough of a silhouette to suggest a fighter-sized jet with two vertical stabilizers. A white covering completely obscured the aircraft's fuselage, wings, and tail surfaces, hiding any markings, intakes, or sensor shapes that might allow firm identification. For analysts, the most significant clue in the photos is the twin-tail silhouette itself, which often points to a high-performance fighter or advanced testbed rather than a basic trainer or support aircraft. Based on relative size and proportions, the shrouded jet's dimensions seem broadly comparable to an F-15 class fighter, suggesting a large, twin-engine combat aircraft or prototype. Japan's Air Self-Defense Force operates the F-15J and two-seat F-15DJ as its main high-end interceptor fleet, making Gifu a natural place to see Eagle family jets undergoing tests or upgrades. Gifu Air Base regularly hosts F-15 test activities, including avionics upgrades, systems trials, and integration work, so unusual F-15-size silhouettes are not uncommon there. The mystery plane photos appeared around the same time as separate information about a new facility at Gifu began circulating, hinting that the two developments could be related. An open-source intelligence account revealed that Gifu is getting a new electronic warfare evaluation facility, drawing attention to the base's growing role in testing advanced systems. This new installation is intended to replace an existing anechoic chamber, upgrading Japan's ability to test aircraft and systems against complex radar and electronic threat environments. An anechoic chamber is a specialized test space used to measure how an aircraft's shape and materials interact with radar, helping engineers understand and refine its survivability and electronic performance in combat conditions. It is therefore entirely possible that the shrouded aircraft at Gifu was either undergoing radar-related evaluation or being prepared for tests linked to this upgraded facility. In that scenario, the external white covering would be a simple way to prevent satellites or casual photography from revealing the jet's detailed features, edges, and radar-relevant geometry. At a minimum, the images strongly suggest that Japan is actively testing something its Air Self-Defense Force prefers not to disclose publicly yet, whether that's a heavily modified F-15 or a more advanced prototype. Gifu Base in central Japan is home to the Air Development and Test Wing, the unit responsible for trialing cutting-edge aircraft and systems before they enter frontline service. This wing is tasked with evaluating new aircraft, onboard systems, weapons, and other equipment, making it the natural place for any secretive flight test program to operate. Because Gifu routinely hosts a diverse mix of types, from fighters and trainers to prototypes and testbeds, it is also the most likely location for rare and unusual aircraft sightings like this one. Notably, this shrouded aircraft sighting emerged just as China was raising the alarm over Japan's rapid military developments, feeding Beijing's concern that Tokyo is quietly fielding capabilities aimed squarely at countering China. Japan's accelerating military buildup is turning it into a regional powder keg, China has warned, accusing Tokyo of destabilizing the security balance in East Asia. The remarks were made by China's Defense Ministry spokesperson Chen Shi, according to reports dated June 17 that covered his regular press briefing. This came as Japan released a new defense white paper that for the first time branded China an unprecedented challenge to its security environment. In the paper, Japan vowed to counter what it calls the Chinese threat with its full comprehensive national strength, including military, economic, and technological tools.